There is a moment, if you allow yourself to be still, when you can feel the truth of who you are beneath all the layers of what you have been told you are. It is not a loud moment. It does not announce itself with fanfare or demand your attention. It simply waits, patiently, like the sun behind clouds, knowing that eventually the clouds will pass and its light will shine through. This moment is always available to you, in every breath, in every heartbeat, in the space between your thoughts where your true self resides. Most of us spend our lives looking for ourselves in all the wrong places. We search in the opinions of others, in our achievements, in our failures, in the roles we play and the masks we wear. We look for ourselves in the mirror each morning, but what we see there is not really us. What we see is a reflection filtered through years of conditioning, through beliefs that were given to us before we were old enough to choose them for ourselves. We see a story, a character in a dream that we did not write, and we mistake this character for who we truly are. The eyes that look back at you from the mirror carry the weight of every judgment you have ever received, every criticism, every moment when someone told you that you were not enough or too much, not smart enough or too emotional, not beautiful enough or too proud. These eyes have learned to see through the lens of comparison, through the measurements of a world that profits from your dissatisfaction with yourself. They have forgotten how to see with the innocence and wonder that you were born with before you learned that there was something wrong with you that needed to be fixed. But there is nothing wrong with you, there never was. What happened is that you learned to see yourself through eyes that were not your own. You learned to measure yourself against standards that were created by people who had also forgotten their true nature. You learned to judge yourself with the voice of those who had been judged, to criticize yourself with the words of those who had been criticized. This is how the dream perpetuates itself, passing from one generation to the next, each person unconsciously teaching their children to see through the same distorted lens through which they learned to see themselves. When you were very small, before you learned language, before you learned the names for things, you knew yourself differently. You knew yourself as pure awareness, as consciousness itself, without any need to define or limit or categorize what you were. You existed in a state of being that required no explanation, no justification, no improvement. You were whole and complete exactly as you were, not because someone told you so, but because wholeness and completeness were your natural state. Then you began to learn the language of separation. You learned the word me, and with it came the need to define what me meant in relation to everything that was not me. You learned your name, and with your name came the beginning of your identity, the character you would play in the dream of your family, your culture, your society. It whispers that you are not enough, that you cannot be trusted with important things, that love is dangerous and will only lead to more hurt. It carries the voice of every person who ever made you feel less than, every situation in which you felt powerless, every moment when you needed comfort and protection and did not receive it. This pain has become a lens through which you see yourself and your possibilities, a filter that colors every new experience with the emotions and conclusions of old wounds. But here is what the pain does not tell you. You are not your wounds. The things that happen to you, however painful, however traumatic, however unfair, are not the truth of who you are. They are experiences that occur to the consciousness that you are, events that happened in the story of your life, but they are not your identity, not your essence, not your fundamental nature. You are the awareness that experienced the pain, not the pain itself. You are the sky through which the storm passed, not the storm. This distinction is not meant to minimize your pain or to suggest that your experiences were not real or important. Your pain is valid. Your experiences matter. The hurt you carried was real hurt. The fear you felt was real fear. The confusion and sadness and anger were real emotions responding to real situations. But acknowledging the reality of your experiences is different from allowing those experiences to define the totality of who you are or what is possible for you. When you were hurt as a child, you created beliefs to help you make sense of what was happening, to give you some sense of control or understanding in a situation that felt chaotic and frightening. If someone you trusted betrayed that trust, you may have concluded that people cannot be trusted. If someone important to you left, you may have decided that you are not worthy of staying for. If you were criticized or punished, you may have determined that there is something fundamentally wrong with you that needs to be hidden or fixed. These beliefs were intelligent responses to difficult situations. They were your young mind's attempt to protect you from future pain by helping you understand how the world works and how to navigate it safely. But what was once protective has often become limiting. The beliefs that were meant to keep you safe have become the very things that keep you trapped in patterns of fear, isolation, and self-doubt. The conclusions you drew from painful experiences have become the boundaries of what you believe is possible for your life. The invitation is not to analyze your pain endlessly, or to relive traumatic experiences, or to blame those who hurt you. The invitation is to recognize that the conclusions you drew from your pain, however understandable, are not necessarily true. The belief that you are not worthy of love because someone treated you as if you were not worthy of love is a misunderstanding. The belief that you cannot succeed because you failed at something important is a confusion between a temporary experience and a permanent identity. The belief that the world is unsafe because you experience danger is a generalization that may no longer serve you. You can honor your pain without being defined by it. You can acknowledge what happened without letting it determine what is possible. You can feel compassion for the part of you that was hurt without believing that this hurt part represents the fullness of who you are. The wounded part of you needs love and understanding, not judgment or dismissal, but it also does not need to be in charge of your life. Does not need to make decisions about your future based on the fears and limitations of the past. Healing happens not through fixing or changing or improving yourself, but through remembering what was always true about you, even in your darkest moments. In the midst of your deepest pain, there was still something in you that was untouched, unharmed, unbroken. There was still the pure consciousness that you are, the awareness that observes all experiences without being damaged by any of them. There was still the love that is your essential nature, even when it felt buried under layers of hurt and fear and confusion. This untouched essence of who you are is not naive or innocent in the sense of being unaware of pain or suffering. It is innocent in the sense of being pure, unconditioned, free from the distortions that pain can create. It knows that love is your true nature, not because life has been easy, but because love is what remains when everything else falls away. It knows that you are worthy, not because you have proven your worth, but because worth is inherent in being, not earned through performance. From this place of recognition, you can begin to see your pain differently. Instead of being evidence of your brokenness, it becomes evidence of your capacity to feel, to care, to love deeply enough to be hurt when that love is not honored. Instead of being proof of your weakness, it becomes testimony to your strength, to your ability to survive and continue loving despite being hurt. Instead of being a limitation on your future, it becomes wisdom that can help you make choices that honor both your tenderness and your strength. The healing is not about becoming invulnerable or untouchable. The healing is about learning to hold your vulnerability with love rather than with shame, to see your sensitivity as a gift rather than a burden, to understand that your capacity to be hurt is directly connected to your capacity to love, and that both are expressions of the beautiful, open-hearted being that you are. In this understanding, even your pain becomes a doorway to greater self-acceptance, greater compassion, and greater freedom. From the time you could first understand language, you began learning to see yourself through the eyes of others. First your parents, then your teachers, then your peers, then society at large, each with their own opinions about who you should be, how you should behave, what you should value, what you should want from life. These opinions came with such authority, such certainty, that you naturally assumed they must be true. After all, these were the people who knew more than you, who had more experience, who seemed so sure about how the world worked and what was important. Slowly, imperceptibly, you began to trade your own inner knowing for their external approval. You learned to measure your worth by their responses to you, to adjust your behavior based on their reactions, to seek their validation as proof that you were acceptable, lovable, valuable. Their opinions became more important than your own feelings, their judgments more trustworthy than your own inner wisdom. You gave them the power to determine not just how they saw you, but how you saw yourself. This was not a conscious choice. No one decided one day to give their power away to others. It happened gradually, naturally, as part of the normal process of learning to live in a social world. You needed approval to survive, needed acceptance to belong, needed validation to feel safe. The opinions of others became a form of currency that you learned to collect and hoard, evidence that you were doing life correctly, that you were worthy of love and belonging and respect. But what began as a survival strategy became a prison. The need for approval became an addiction that could never be fully satisfied because there would always be someone who disapproved, someone who had different opinions, someone whose validation felt just out of reach. You found yourself changing like a chameleon, becoming whatever you thought others wanted you to be, losing touch with your own authentic preferences and desires in the endless pursuit of external acceptance. Notice how much energy you spend thinking about what others think of you. Notice how often you modify your behavior, your appearance, your choices based not on what feels true and right to you, but on what you imagine others will approve of or judge. Notice how you carry conversations in you, our mind, explaining yourself to imaginary critics, defending choices you do not need to defend, seeking approval from people who may not even be thinking about you at all. The opinions of others have become a constant background noise in your mind, a running commentary on everything you do, say, wear, think, feel. This commentary often conflicts with your own inner knowing, creating a state of internal tension and confusion. Part of you wants to follow your heart, to trust your own judgment, to live according to your own values and desires. But another part of you is terrified of disappointing others, of being judged or rejected or criticized, of standing out or being different or making waves. This internal conflict is exhausting. It keeps you in a constant state of vigilance, constantly monitoring and adjusting and second-guessing yourself. It prevents you from fully committing to anything, because there is always the fear that others will disapprove, that you will be seen as wrong or foolish or inappropriate. It blocks your natural spontaneity and creativity, because these qualities require a willingness to be authentic, even when that authenticity might not be understood or appreciated by everyone. But here is the truth that can set you free. Other people's opinions of you are none of your business. Their opinions are about them, not about you. They are projections of their own fears, beliefs, values, experiences, limitations. They see you through the filter of their own conditioning, their own wounds, their own unhealed places. Their approval or disapproval says nothing about your worth, your truth, your value as a human being. When someone judges you, they are not seeing you clearly. They are seeing you through the lens of their own story, comparing you to their own expectations, measuring you against their own standards. Their judgment is a reflection of their inner world, not an accurate assessment of who you are. Understanding this does not make their opinions meaningless, but it does free you from the need to be controlled by them. The same is true for approval. When someone approves of you, validates you, tells you that you are wonderful, they are often seeing you through the filter of their own needs, their own projections, their own desires. Their approval can feel good, and it is natural to enjoy being appreciated, but it is not a reliable source of self-worth because it is based on their perception, not on the truth of who you are. Your worth does not fluctuate based on external opinions. It is not higher when you are praised and lower when you are criticized. It is not dependent on being understood, appreciated, or approved of by others. Your worth is inherent, constant, unchanging, like the value of a precious stone that does not become more or less valuable based on who is looking at it or what they think of it. The practice is to reclaim your own authority over your life, your choices, your self-perception. This does not mean becoming selfish or inconsiderate or dismissive of others. It means learning to distinguish between the valuable input that others can offer and the projections and judgments that have nothing to do with you. It means developing your own internal compass, your own sense of what is true and right and meaningful for you. When you stop seeking approval from others, you stop being controlled by their opinions. When you stop fearing their disapproval, you stop being limited by their judgments. This creates space for your authentic self to emerge, for your true preferences and desires and values to be expressed without the constant filter of what others might think. It allows you to make choices based on your own inner wisdom rather than on external expectations. This freedom is not about isolation or independence from all human connection. Healthy relationships involve mutual respect, consideration, and care. But this consideration comes from love, not from fear. It comes from a genuine desire to honor and support each other, not from a desperate need for approval or validation. When you are free from the need for others' opinions, you can engage with them more authentically, more generously, more lovingly, because you are not asking them to complete you or validate you or make you feel worthy. The freedom from others' opinions is the freedom to be yourself fully, completely, unapologetically. It is the freedom to follow your own path, to trust your own judgment, to live according to your own truth. It is the freedom to make mistakes without shame, to change your mind without justification, to grow and evolve without having to explain yourself to anyone. In this freedom, you discover that the approval you were seeking from others was always available from within, that the love you were trying to earn was always your birthright, that the acceptance you were chasing was always yours to give to yourself. When you strip away all the stories, all the masks, all the pain, all the opinions that others have projected onto you, what remains is something so pure, so beautiful, so perfect that the mind can barely comprehend it. What remains is your divine nature, the essence of what you truly are beneath all the layers of human conditioning and learned limitation. This essence has never been damaged, never been diminished, never been anything less than perfect love expressing itself in physical form. It is not something you need to achieve or earn or become. It is what you are, what you have always been, what you will always be. Your divine nature is not separate from your human nature. It is not something that exists in some distant spiritual realm that you must reach through years of practice and purification. It is here, now, in this moment, breathing through your lungs, beating in your heart, shining through your eyes, expressing itself through every cell of your being. It is the consciousness that is aware of reading these words right now, the awareness that knows itself without needing to think about itself, the love that exists prior to any reason for loving. This divine essence is what was looking out through your eyes when you were a baby, before you learned language, before you learned that there was supposed to be something wrong with you that needed fixing. It is what was present in moments of pure joy, when you forgot yourself completely and merged with the beauty of a sunset or the laughter of a friend or the simple pleasure of being alive. It is what was there in your deepest sorrow, holding you with infinite tenderness even when you felt most alone and broken. The mind has learned to see divinity as something grand and otherworldly, something that belongs to saints and sages and special people who have transcended ordinary human experience. But true divinity is not about transcendence. It is about recognition. It is about seeing clearly what was always here, what was never absent, what could never be lost, no matter what experiences you have had or what mistakes you think you have made. Your divine nature expresses itself through your humanity, not despite it. It shines through your laughter and your tears, your struggles and your triumphs, your confusion and your clarity. It is present in your anger and your joy, your fear and your love, because it is the very consciousness in which all these experiences arise. It does not judge any experience as more or less spiritual, more or less worthy, more or less divine. It simply allows all experiences to be exactly what they are, holding them all with equal love and acceptance. This recognition changes everything and changes nothing. It changes everything because it reveals that you have never been separate from love, never been outside of grace, never been anything less than a perfect expression of the divine creativity that moves through all of life. It changes nothing because this truth was always true, whether you recognized it or not, whether you believed it or not, whether you felt worthy of it or not. Living from this recognition does not mean you will never feel pain or confusion or fear. These are natural parts of human experience, and your divine nature does not exempt you from the full spectrum of what it means to be human. But it does mean that you will hold these experiences differently, knowing that they arise within the vastness of your being, rather than defining the totality of who you are. You will meet them with compassion rather than resistance, with curiosity rather than judgment, with love rather than fear. The practice of recognizing your divine nature is not about trying to feel spiritual or holy or enlightened. It is about paying attention to what is always present, always available, always here. It is about noticing the peace that exists beneath your thoughts, the love that flows through your heart even when your mind is troubled, the wisdom that speaks through your intuition even when your personality feels confused and uncertain. This recognition happens in the simplest moments. When you pause to feel your breath, you are touching your divine nature. When you look into the eyes of another person and see beyond their mask to the essence that shines there, you are recognizing divinity, recognizing itself. When you feel moved by beauty, inspired by music, touched by kindness, you are experiencing your own divine nature responding to itself in its countless forms and expressions. You do not need to become enlightened to recognize your divine nature. You do not need to meditate for years or study ancient texts or have mystical experiences. You simply need to stop believing in the stories that tell you that you are anything less than love itself, temporarily forgetting its true identity while playing in the world of form and experience. The invitation is to treat yourself as the divine being that you are. This means speaking to yourself with the same reverence you would offer to something sacred. It means making choices that honor the preciousness of your being rather than choices that come from the belief that you are insignificant or unworthy. It means allowing yourself to receive love as naturally as you breathe, because love is not something you need to earn, but something you are. When you recognize your own divine nature, you cannot help but recognize it in others as well. Their masks and stories and wounds become transparent, and you see through to the same essence that you have discovered in yourself. This recognition transforms every relationship, every interaction, every moment of connection with another human being. You begin to relate to the divinity in them rather than to their personality, to love the essence of who they are rather than judging the surface expressions of their humanity. This is how the world begins to heal, one person at a time, remembering who they really are, recognizing their own divine nature, and then seeing that same divine nature everywhere they look. It is not about converting others or convincing them of anything. It is simply about being yourself so completely, so authentically, so lovingly, that your very presence becomes an invitation for others to remember their own truth. The recognition of your divine nature is not the end of the journey, but the beginning of a new way of living, a new way of being in the world that is grounded in truth rather than illusion, in love rather than fear, in freedom rather than limitation. This new way of living requires practice, not because you need to become something you are not, but because you need to unlearn the habits of thinking and being that have kept you trapped in the dream of separation and limitation. The practice of living in truth begins with small moments of honesty, small choices to honor what you know to be real rather than what you have been taught to believe. It begins with noticing when you are speaking from love and when you are speaking from fear, when you are acting from your authentic nature and when you are playing a role that no longer serves you. It begins with the willingness to feel what you feel without immediately trying to change it or fix it or understand it, to allow your emotions to move through you like weather moving through the sky. Each day offers countless opportunities to practice being authentic rather than performing, to choose love rather than fear, to speak truth rather than saying what you think others want to hear. These opportunities come disguised as ordinary moments, conversations with family members, interactions with coworkers, choices about how to spend your time, decisions about what to think about the endless stream of information that flows through your awareness each day. The practice is not about perfection. There is no perfect way to live in truth, no ideal standard to achieve or maintain. The practice is about intention, about the commitment to notice when you are living from your true nature and when you are living from your conditioning, and to gently, lovingly guide yourself back to authenticity whenever you recognize that you have drifted into performance or fear or the attempt to be something you are not. This guidance is gentle because force creates resistance, Because judgment creates shame, because criticism creates the very patterns you are trying to transform. The voice that guides you back to truth speaks with the same unconditional love with which a mother guides a child who is learning to walk, celebrating each step forward without criticism for the inevitable falls and stumbles that are part of any learning process. The practice involves learning to catch yourself in the moment when you are about to speak from your wounds rather than from your wisdom, when you are about to react from your conditioning rather than respond from your truth. This catching happens not through hypervigilance or constant self-monitoring, but through the natural awareness that develops as you become more familiar with the difference between how it feels to be authentic and how it feels to be performing. Authenticity has a particular quality of energy, a feeling of alignment and flow and ease that is recognizable once you know what to look for. Even when authentic expression involves difficult emotions or challenging conversations, there is still an underlying sense of rightness, of being in harmony with yourself, of honoring the truth of what is present. Performance, on the other hand, always carries a subtle tension, a sense of effort and monitoring and adjustment that creates fatigue even when the performance is successful. The practice also involves learning to make agreements with yourself that support your authenticity rather than your conditioning. These are not rules or commandments imposed from outside, but natural guidelines that emerge from your own wisdom about what supports your well-being and what undermines it. They might include agreements about how you speak to yourself, how you treat your body, how you spend your energy, how you engage with others. These agreements evolve as you evolve. What serves you at one stage of your growth may no longer serve you at another stage. The practice is to remain flexible and responsive to your own changing needs and understanding, to hold your agreements lightly rather than rigidly, to be willing to adjust them as your awareness deepens and your circumstances change. Perhaps the most important agreement you can make with yourself is the agreement to be patient with your own process of awakening. This process does not happen according to any timeline or schedule. It happens in its own time, in its own way, with its own rhythm of expansion and contraction, clarity and confusion, breakthrough and integration. The mind wants to rush this process to achieve some final state of enlightenment or freedom or peace. But consciousness unfolds like a flower blooms, naturally and organically without force or hurry. The practice involves learning to trust this natural unfolding, to have faith in your own capacity for growth and healing and transformation, even when you cannot see evidence of progress, even when you feel like you are moving backward or standing still. The trust is not based on proof or evidence, but on the recognition that the same intelligence that grows your hair and heals your cuts and beats your heart is also guiding your spiritual evolution. And this intelligence knows what it is doing even when your mind does not understand the process. As the practice deepens, you begin to notice that living in truth becomes easier, more natural, more automatic. The habits of authenticity begin to replace the habits of performance. The voice of love becomes stronger and more familiar than the voice of fear. The choice to honor your true nature becomes the obvious choice, not because it is always easy, but because it is always right, always aligned with the deepest truth of who you are. This is not a practice that you complete or master or finish. It is a practice that you live, that you embody, that you express through every breath and every choice and every moment of awareness. It is the practice of being yourself so completely that your life becomes a work of art, a prayer, a gift to the world that only you can give. When you live from the truth of who you are rather than from the illusions you learned about who you should be, your entire relationship with power changes. The power you have been seeking in the external world, the power that comes from achievement, approval, control, success, reveals itself to be a pale imitation of the authentic power that has always been yours by virtue of your very existence. This authentic power does not depend on circumstances, does not fluctuate based on external conditions, does not require maintenance or protection or validation from others. Authentic power flows from the recognition that you are the creator of your own experience, not through magical thinking or wishful manifestation, but through the understanding that your perception shapes your reality, your beliefs influence your choices, and your choices determine your experience. You cannot control what happens to you, but you have absolute sovereignty over how you respond to what happens, what meaning you assign to events, what stories you tell yourself about your life and your possibilities. This power is not power over others, but power with others. Not the power to control, but the power to create. Not the power to dominate, but the power to love. It expresses itself through your capacity to remain centered in your truth, regardless of external circumstances, to respond and then react, to choose love even when fear would be easier, to maintain your integrity even when compromise would be more convenient. Living from authentic power means making choices based on your own inner guidance rather than on external expectations or pressures. It means trusting your intuition even when you cannot explain or justify your knowing to others. It means honoring your boundaries even when others do not understand or appreciate them. It means expressing your truth even when that expression is not welcomed or celebrated. This power is not aggressive or forceful. It does not need to prove itself or defend itself or justify itself. It simply is, like the power of water that consistently flows toward the sea, like the power of a seed that knows how to become a tree, like the power of love that transforms everything it touches without ever trying to change anything. It is the power of being yourself so completely that your very presence becomes an invitation for others to remember their own authenticity. When you live from authentic power, you no longer need to manipulate or control others to feel safe or worthy or valuable. You no longer need to prove your worth through achievement or accumulation or approval. You no longer need to defend yourself against criticism or attack because you know that what others say about you has nothing to do with the truth of who you are. This freedom from the need to control creates space for genuine intimacy, real connection, authentic relationship. The relationships that form around your authentic power are different from the relationships that formed around your masks and performances. They are based on truth rather than illusion, on acceptance rather than approval, on love rather than need. People are drawn to your authenticity, not because it is perfect, but because it is real, not because it is always comfortable, but because it is always honest. Some people will not like your authentic power. It will threaten the illusions they have built about themselves and their world. It will challenge the games they play, the roles they insist on, the dynamics they are comfortable with. Your refusal to play along with unconscious patterns will force them to either wake up or walk away. This is not a failure of your power. This is your power working exactly as it should, creating space for real relationship while naturally repelling those who are not ready for authenticity. Living from authentic power also means taking responsibility for your life in a way that is empowering rather than burdensome. It means recognizing that while you did not choose everything that happened to you, especially in childhood, you can choose how to respond to those experiences now. You can choose what to do with the pain you inherited, the patterns you learned, the beliefs you absorbed. You can choose to heal what can be healed, to accept what cannot be changed, and to transform what is ready for transformation. This responsibility is not about blame or guilt or shame. It is about recognizing that you have the power to change your life, not by changing external circumstance. And says, but by changing your relationship to those circumstances, not by becoming someone different, but by becoming more fully yourself. It is the responsibility that comes with freedom, the acknowledgement that if you have the power to create your experience, then you also have the responsibility to use that power wisely and lovingly. The expression of authentic power is different for each person because each person's truth is unique, each person's gifts are unique, each person's purpose is unique. Your authentic power may express itself through leadership or service, through creativity or healing, through teaching or learning, through speaking or listening. The form does not matter. What matters is that whatever you do comes from your truth, serves your growth, and contributes to the well-being of the whole. As you live more consistently from authentic power, you begin to trust life in a deeper way. You begin to see that life is not happening to you, but through you, that you are not a victim of circumstance, but a participant in creation, that every experience is an opportunity to express love more fully, to know yourself more deeply, to serve the greater good more effectively. You learn to see yourself as others saw you, and slowly, imperceptibly, you began to forget the truth of what you are. This is not a tragedy. This is simply how the dream works. Every human being who has ever lived has gone through this process of forgetting and hopefully remembering. The forgetting is not permanent unless you choose to make it so. The truth of who you are never actually disappears. It simply gets covered over, like the sun behind clouds, like clear water that has become muddy but can be clear again when the sediment settles. Take a moment now to feel into this truth. Place your hand on your heart and feel the steady rhythm there, the pulse of life that has been with you since before you had a name, since before you had a story. This heartbeat knows nothing of your failures or successes. It does not care about your weight or your bank account or your relationship status. It simply beats steadily, faithfully, keeping you alive, not because you have earned it, but because life itself is your birthright. Feel the breath moving through your body, the way it flows in and out, without any effort from you, without any instruction or control. This breath has been breathing you since the moment you were born, and it will continue until the moment you leave this body. It breathes you while you sleep, while you worry, while you celebrate, while you suffer. It is completely neutral, completely unconditional in its support of your existence. This is how life loves you. This is how the universe holds you. Now, from this place of feeling your heartbeat and your breath, look again at who you think you are. Notice how much of your identity depends on things outside of this moment, outside of this simple fact of your existence. Notice how much energy you spend trying to maintain and defend and improve an image that exists primarily in your mind and in the minds of others. Notice how exhausting it is to constantly monitor and adjust and perfect this image, how it never quite feels right, how there is always something more to fix or change or achieve. This exhaustion is not a sign that you are not trying hard enough. It is a sign that you are trying to do something that is impossible. You are trying to make real something that was never real in the first place. You are trying to perfect an illusion, to improve a dream, to find your true self in a story that was written before you were conscious enough to choose your own words. The invitation here is not to judge yourself for this. The invitation is simply to notice, with the same gentle awareness with which you might notice clouds moving across the sky. The clouds are not wrong for being there. They are simply clouds, doing what clouds do, temporary formations in the vastness of the sky. And you are the sky, not the clouds. You are the awareness in which all experiences arise and pass away, not the experiences themselves. In this recognition lies the beginning of true sight, the beginning of seeing yourself with eyes of truth rather than eyes of judgment. This trust allows you to relax into the flow of life rather than fighting against it, to work with reality rather than against it, to find the gifts hidden in every challenge and the lessons embedded in every experience. You begin to see that authentic power is not about getting what you want, but about wanting what you have. Not about controlling life, but about dancing with life. Not about imposing your will, but about aligning your will with the deeper intelligence that moves through all things. From this place of alignment, your life becomes an expression of love in action, a demonstration of what is possible when a human being remembers their true nature and lives from that remembering. You become a blessing to the world, not because you are perfect, but because you are real. Not because you have all the answers, but because you are willing to live the questions. Not because you have transcended humanity, but because you have embraced it so completely that the divine shines through your very human experience. And so here we are at the end of this conversation and the beginning of everything that matters. You came seeking to see yourself with eyes of truth, and perhaps you have caught glimpses of who you really are beneath all the stories and masks and judgments that have accumulated over the years of your human journey. Perhaps you have felt the stirring of recognition, the gentle awakening of remembrance, the soft whisper of your soul saying, yes, this is true, this is what I have always known, but forgotten how to see. The truth about you has not changed because of these words. You were always divine, always whole, always worthy of love. You were always free, even when you felt most trapped. You were always powerful, even when you felt most helpless. You were always enough, exactly as you are, without needing to change or improve or become anything other than what you be. You have always been. These words have simply pointed you back to what was never actually lost, only temporarily obscured by the clouds of conditioning and the fog of forgetfulness. But seeing the truth and living the truth are two different things. Knowing who you are and being who you are require different kinds of courage, different kinds of commitment, different kinds of love. The knowing can happen in an instant, like a flash of lightning illuminating the landscape of your being. But the living happens one moment at a time, one choice at a time, one breath at a time, as you learn to translate your deepest understanding into the practical reality of daily existence. This is not work that you do once and then complete. This is the work of a lifetime, the ongoing practice of remembering and forgetting and remembering again, of falling asleep to your truth and awakening to it, of getting lost in the dream and finding your way back to reality. There will be days when you see clearly and days when everything seems clouded. There will be moments of profound clarity and moments of deep confusion. This is not a sign that you are doing something wrong. This is simply how consciousness explores itself, how love learns to recognize itself in all its countless disguises. Be patient with yourself as you would be patient with a beloved friend who is learning something new and difficult. Be gentle with yourself as you would be gentle with a small child who is taking their first steps. Be compassionate with yourself as you would be compassionate with anyone who has been hurt and is learning to trust again. You are all of these. The friend learning something new, the child taking first steps, the wounded one learning to trust. You deserve the same kindness that you would offer to any of them. Remember that every person you meet is also learning to see themselves with eyes of truth, also struggling to remember who they really are beneath their own layers of conditioning and protection. Some are further along in this remembering, some are just beginning, some have forgotten so completely that they attack anyone who reminds them of what they have lost. Meet them all with compassion, knowing that their behavior toward you says everything about their relationship with themselves and nothing about your worth or truth. The world needs you to remember who you are, not because you are special or chosen or better than anyone else, but because you are you, and no one else can offer what you have to offer. No one else can love the way you love, create the way you create, see the way you see, contribute what you have to contribute. The universe is not complete without your unique expression of consciousness, your particular way of being divine in human form. Trust the process of your own unfolding. Trust that the same intelligence that knows how to grow forests and birth stars and heal wounds also knows how to guide you home to yourself. Trust that every experience, even the difficult ones, even the painful ones, even the ones you would never choose, is somehow serving your awakening, somehow contributing to your growth, somehow helping you remember more. Fully who you are. And in those quiet moments when you sit with yourself, when you breathe into the space of your own being, when you feel the steadiness of your heartbeat and the miracle of your aliveness, remember this: you are not a human being having a spiritual experience. You are consciousness itself, temporarily wearing the costume of humanity, playing in the world of form while never forgetting your true nature as formless love. You are the dreamer and the dream, the observer and the observed, the lover and the beloved, all at once, all always, always. This is who you are. This is who you have always been. This is who you will always be. See yourself with these eyes of truth and let this seeing transform not just how you experience yourself, but how you experience everything and everyone you encounter in this beautiful, mysterious, sacred adventure of being alive. The journey continues with each breath you take, each choice you make, each moment you choose, love over fear, truth over illusion, authenticity over performance. There is no destination to reach, no final awakening to achieve. There is only this moment, this breath, this opportunity to be yourself more fully than you were in the last moment. And this is enough. You are enough. You have always been enough. It is a gentle sing, a loving sing, a sing that does not need to change or fix or improve anything, but simply allows what is to be exactly as it is. Knowing that in this allowing, in this acceptance, lies the very freedom you have been seeking all along. There is a voice inside your head that has been talking for as long as you can remember. It comments on everything, judges everything, has an opinion about every person you meet, every choice you make, every thought you think. This voice is so constant, so familiar, that you probably mistake it for yourself. You think this voice is you thinking, that these judgments are your judgments, that this commentary is your own wisdom speaking. But if you listen carefully, if you pay attention to the quality of this voice, you will begin to notice something important. This voice does not speak with love. This voice learned to speak long ago in moments when you were small and vulnerable and trying to understand how to be safe in a world that often felt unsafe. It learned by listening to the voices around you, the voices of parents and teachers and siblings and strangers, all of whom had their own versions of this voice, all of whom had learned to judge themselves and others as a way of trying to navigate the complexity of human life. Your voice learned to mimic their voices, to adopt their standards, to make their fears your fears and their judgments your judgments. The voice learned to be useful in its own way. It learned to anticipate criticism by criticizing first. It learned to avoid rejection by rejecting first. It learned to prevent disappointment by expecting the worst. It learned to protect you from the pain of not being enough by constantly reminding you of all the ways you were not enough, as if by staying aware of your inadequacies you could somehow fix them, or at least not be surprised by them when others pointed them out. But what was once a protective mechanism has become a prison. The voice that was meant to keep you safe has become the very thing that keeps you trapped in cycles of self-doubt and self-criticism. The voice that was meant to help you improve has become the voice that tells you that you can never improve enough. The voice that was meant to guide you has become the voice that drowns out your own inner wisdom with its constant chatter and commentary. Listen to this voice for a moment. Notice its tone. Notice how it speaks to you about your appearance, your choices, your relationships, your work. Would you allow a stranger to speak to you this way? Would you allow a friend to talk to your child this way? Yet you allow this voice to run continuously in your mind, commenting and judging and criticizing not just you, but everyone around you, creating a constant stream of mental noise that blocks your ability to hear the deeper truth that lives beneath the surface of your thoughts. The voice has learned to speak in absolutes. You're always this or never that. You should do this or should not do that. You are good or bad, right or wrong, enough or not enough. The voice does not recognize nuance or complexity or the simple truth that you are a human being having a human experience, learning as you go, making mistakes and discoveries and changes as you grow. The voice sees only through the lens of judgment, and judgment is always a form of separation, a way of creating distance between what is and what the mind thinks should be. Notice how this voice has different tones for different situations. Sometimes it is harsh and critical, like a strict parent who is never satisfied. Sometimes it is worried and fearful, like an anxious friend who sees danger everywhere. Sometimes it is demanding and perfectionist, like a taskmaster who believes that if you just try harder, work longer, do more, you will finally be acceptable. But regardless of its tone, the underlying message is always the same. You are not quite right as you are, and until you fix yourself, you cannot be truly happy or worthy of love. This voice has been with you for so long that you may not even realize it is possible to live without it, or at least without its dominance. You may think that self-criticism is necessary for growth, that judgment is required for discernment, that the constant mental commentary is simply how minds work. But this is not true. There is a difference between the wisdom that arises from awareness and the noise that arises from conditioning. There is a difference between discernment that comes from love and judgment that comes from fear. The voice of judgment is not your voice. It is the voice of every person who ever judged themselves, passed down through generations like a genetic inheritance of suffering. It is the voice of a world that has forgotten how to see with love, that has learned to see with comparison and competition and criticism instead. You did not choose this voice. You inherited it, absorbed it, learned it without knowing why. We're learning it, and now it speaks through you as if it were your own truth. But you can learn to distinguish between this voice and your true voice. Your true voice does not judge, it observes, it does not criticize, it understands, it does not demand perfection. It accepts what is while remaining open to what is possible. Your true voice speaks with the same unconditional love with which your heart beats and your lungs breathe. It is patient and kind and gentle, not because it is weak, but because love is the strongest force in the universe. The practice is not to fight with the voice of judgment or to try to make it go away. Fighting with the voice only makes it stronger, only gives it more attention and energy. The practice is to recognize the voice for what it is, a learned pattern of thinking that once served a purpose but no longer serves you. The practice is to listen to the voice without believing everything it says, to hear its commentary without taking it as truth, to notice its presence without allowing it to define your reality. When you hear the voice criticizing your appearance, you can simply notice. There is the voice that has learned to see through the eyes of judgment. When you hear it telling you that you should be different than you are, you can recognize there is the voice that believes in the illusion of perfection. When you hear it comparing you to others or measuring your worth against external standards, you can observe there is the voice that has forgotten that worth is inherent, not earned. In this recognition, in this gentle witnessing, the voice begins to lose its power over you, not because you have destroyed it or overcome it, but because you have seen it clearly for what it is, a collection of thoughts and beliefs that you learn from others, not the truth of who you are. And in seeing this clearly, you create space for your true voice to emerge, the voice that has been waiting patiently beneath all the noise, the voice that knows your worth without question and speaks to you always with love. All your life, you have been telling yourself stories about who you are, what you are capable of, what you deserve, how the world works, and what is possible for you. These stories feel so real, so true, that you probably do not think of them as stories at all. You think of them as facts, as reality, as the way things simply are. But they are not facts. They are interpretations, narratives you have created to make sense of your experiences, to explain to yourself why things happen the way they do and who you are in relation to everything else. Some of these stories you created yourself from your own experiences and observations, but many of them, perhaps most of them, you inherited. You learned them from your family, your culture, your society, your religion, your education. You absorbed them without realizing you were absorbing them, the way a plant absorbs water through its roots, taking in not just what nourishes, but also what limits and constrains its growth. These inherited stories became the framework through of which you learn to see yourself and your place in the world. There is the story about your intelligence, created perhaps from a few moments in school when you struggled with a particular subject or when someone compared you unfavorably to a sibling or classmate. From these moments, you created a narrative about your mental capabilities that has influenced every learning experience since, every challenge you have faced, every opportunity you have either embraced or avoided. This story has become so embedded in your self-concept that you no longer question whether it is true. You simply live it as if it were an unchangeable fact about yourself. There is the story about your attractiveness, your worthiness of love, your ability to succeed, your capacity for happiness. Each story was born from moments of pain or joy, criticism or praise, rejection or acceptance, and then reinforced over time through repetition and the selective attention you paid to experiences that seem to confirm what you already believed about yourself. The mind is remarkably skilled at finding evidence for whatever it already believes, filtering reality through the lens of its existing stories and seeing only what supports the narrative it has already constructed. These stories have shaped not just how you see yourself, but how you move through the world. They determine what you attempt and what you avoid, what you believe is possible for you, and what you believe is beyond your reach. They influence your relationships, your career choices, your dreams, your fears. They create the boundaries of what you consider to be your reality, and within those boundaries, they feel absolutely true and completely limiting at the same time. But what if these stories are not true? What if they were never true? What if they are simply collections of thoughts and beliefs that you have repeated so often that they have gained the appearance of reality without ever actually being real? What if the limitations you have accepted as facts about yourself are actually just limitations you learn to believe in, stories you learn to tell about what is possible and what is not? Consider the story you tell about your past. Notice how this story emphasizes certain events and de-emphasizes others, how it interprets experiences through a particular lens, how it creates meaning and draws conclusions that may have nothing to do with what actually happened. Two people can experience the same event and create completely different stories about what it means, what it says about them, what it predicts about their future. Which story is true? Perhaps neither, perhaps both. Perhaps truth is something deeper than story, something that exists before interpretation, before meaning-making, before the mind's need to explain and categorize and understand. The stories you tell about your relationships follow the same pattern. You create narratives about why people behave the way they do, what their actions mean about how they feel about you, what you can expect from them in the future. These stories become the filter through which you experience every interaction, causing you to see evidence of love or rejection, support or criticism, based not on what is actually happening, but on the story you have already created about what is happening. How many relationships have been damaged or destroyed, not by what actually occurred between people, but by the stories they told themselves about what occurred. Even your story about your own emotions follows this pattern. You learn to interpret your feelings through the lens of stories about what different emotions mean, whether they are acceptable or unacceptable, whether they make you weak or strong, whether they are evidence of your mental health or mental illness. You learn to judge your emotional responses based on stories about how you should feel, rather than simply allowing yourself to feel what you feel and trust that your emotions, like everything else in nature, have their own intelligence and purpose. The most limiting stories are often the ones about your potential, about what you are capable of becoming. These stories were usually created during moments of vulnerability, when you were young or hurt or afraid, and they carry the energy of those moments forward into your present experience. They tell you that you are not creative because someone once criticized your art, that you are not athletic because you were picked last for teams, that you are not smart because you struggled in school, that you are not lovable because someone important once left you or rejected you. But notice that these stories are always about the past, always based on what was rather than what is or what could be. They freeze you in a moment of limitation and project that limitation forward into all future moments, as if you were incapable of growth, change, learning, healing, transformation. They deny the fundamental truth of your nature, which is that you are not a fixed entity, but a dynamic process, not a noun but a verb, not a thing but a movement of consciousness that is constantly creating itself anew in each moment. The invitation is not to replace negative stories with positive ones, not to simply create better narratives about yourself and your life. The invitation is to recognize that you are not any story at all. You are the awareness in which all stories arise and pass away, the consciousness that observes all experiences without being limited by any of them. You are the space in which thoughts appear and disappear, the stillness in which all movement occurs, the silence in which all words are spoken. When you recognize yourself as awareness rather than as the content of awareness, as consciousness rather than as the objects that appear in consciousness, the stories lose their power to define and limit you. They become what they always were, temporary formations in the vast sky of your being, clouds that pass through but do not change the essential nature of the sky itself. You can watch them come and go without being disturbed by them, without believing in their reality, without allowing them to determine your sense of who you are or what is possible for you. From this place of recognition, you are free to create new stories if you choose, stories that serve rather than limit, stories that inspire rather than constrain, stories that reflect the truth of your unlimited nature rather than the lies of your learned limitations. But even these new stories are just stories, not truth itself, useful tools for navigating human experience, but not definitions of your essential being. The stories you tell about yourself have created layers upon layers of identity, like costumes you put on for different occasions, different people, different situations. These are the masks you have learned to wear, the personas you have developed to navigate the complex social world you were born into. There is the mask you wear at work, polished and professional, hiding any trace of uncertainty or vulnerability. There is the mask you wear with your family, playing the role that was assigned to you long ago, the responsible one or the rebellious one, the successful one or the one who needs taking care of. There is the mask you wear with friends, with strangers, with lovers, each one carefully crafted to show only what you believe is acceptable, only what you think will earn you belonging and approval. These masks were not created by accident. They were carefully constructed over years of observation and experimentation, trial and error, as you learned what worked and what did not work in getting your needs met, in staying safe, in being loved. Each mask represents a strategy for survival, a way of being that once helped you navigate a situation or relationship that felt too dangerous or too important to risk being completely authentic. The masks were born from intelligence, from your deep wisdom about what the world around you needed you to be in order for you to be accepted and included. But what began as intelligent adaptation has become unconscious imprisonment. The masks that once protected you now separate you from your own truth, from your own heart, from your own authentic expression. You have worn them for so long that you may have forgotten what lies beneath them, may have forgotten that they are masks at all. You may have come to believe that these carefully constructed personas are who you really are, that the polished presentations you offer to the world represent the fullness of your being. Notice how exhausting it is to maintain these different versions of yourself, how much energy it takes to remember which mask to wear in which situation, how to speak and move and respond in ways that fit the character you are playing. Notice how rarely you feel completely relaxed and natural, how often there is a sense of performance, of monitoring, of adjusting yourself to meet the expectations of others or to avoid their disapproval. This exhaustion is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign that you are trying to be something you are not, that you are expending enormous energy maintaining illusions that were never necessary in the first place. The masks have become so familiar that taking them off feels dangerous, even terrifying. Who would you be without your professional competence, your family role, your social personality? Who would accept you if you showed up as you really are, with all your uncertainties and vulnerabilities and imperfections? The masks promise safety, predictability, control over how others see you and respond to you, but they also promise loneliness because no one can truly know you or love you when they are only seeing the mask, only relating to the persona you have created rather than the authentic being you are. Underneath every mask is the same truth. You are already whole, already complete, already worthy of love exactly as you are. The masks were created from the false belief that your authentic self is not enough, that who you really are would be rejected or criticized or abandoned if revealed. But this belief was based on fear, not truth. It was based on the judgments of people who were also wearing masks, who were also afraid to be seen, who were also operating from their own wounds and limitations and learned beliefs about what is acceptable and what is not. The invitation to remove the masks is not an invitation to be reckless or inappropriate, not a call to disregard social situations or professional requirements. The invitation is to recognize that you can play any role that is required without losing yourself in that role, without believing that the role is who you are. You can wear the mask of professionalism at work while knowing that you are much more than your job title. You can fulfill your family role while maintaining connection to your own authentic desires and needs. You can be socially appropriate while remaining internally true to yourself. This recognition creates a different quality of presence, a different way of moving through the world. When you know that you are not the mask, you can wear it lightly, playfully, without the heaviness of believing that your worth depends on how well you perform the role. You can engage with others from a place of genuine curiosity and care rather than from the strategic place of trying to manage their impressions of you. You can allow yourself to be seen gradually and safely in ways that feel authentic and true. The process of removing masks is gentle, not violent. It happens naturally as you become more comfortable with your own authentic nature, as you experience the relief and freedom that comes from being genuine rather than performing. It happens as you discover that people often respond more positively to your authenticity than to your performance. That real connection happens when real people meet each other rather than when masks interact with masks. Some people will not like it when you begin to remove your masks. They may have become comfortable with the version of you that you presented, may have their own investment in keeping you in the role you have been playing. This is not a reason to keep the masks on. This is simply information about their own fears, their own attachment to illusion, their own discomfort with authenticity. Your commitment is not to make others comfortable with their illusions. Your commitment is to your own truth, your own freedom, your own authentic expression. As the masks come off layer by layer, what remains is what was always there, the pure essence of who you are, the consciousness that was never damaged or diminished by any experience, the love that is your fundamental nature. This essence does not need to be improved or perfected or made more acceptable. It simply needs to be recognized, honored, and allowed to express itself freely and naturally in the world. Beneath the masks, beneath the stories, beneath all the layers of identity you have constructed, there is often pain. Old pain, young pain, pain that you may have forgotten about, or pain that you carry with you every day like a heavy stone in your heart. This pain was created in moments when you were hurt, rejected, abandoned, criticized, betrayed, or misunderstood. Moments when the world felt unsafe and you felt small and powerless and alone. These moments of pain created beliefs about yourself and about life that have shaped everything that came after. Beliefs that feel true because they were born from real experiences, even though they may have nothing to do with who you really are. The pain tells a story about your worth, your lovability, your safety in the world,